Ladies, gentlemen, and travelers of all ages, with it now being a decent chunk of time since the release of 1.0 for Last Epoch, there's lots of people settling into the endgame in one way or another, and it can be a bit complex at the offset, so today I'm looking back at my time before reaching empowered monoliths, and I'll be going over some of the mistakes that I made and tips that I've got to share with you to hopefully make your journey a little bit smoother on the way up too, as well as mistakes that I've seen other people make and some tips I've got from those as well. First and foremost then, this goes for everyone. Once you have reached the endgame stage of Last Epoch, level 50 plus, monoliths and everything like that, do not be afraid to try out new skills or change your specialization or passive points around a little bit to test and experiment and see how things can differ. This is an inadvisable thing to do during the campaign early on because doing so reduces the levels that you have in a skill or drops them significantly if you're just despecializing them completely. But once you are in monoliths, the skill leveling specifically is so comparatively quick that it leaves you much more free to try out slight variations and then go back with minimal penalties, honestly. On a further note of the same sort of idea then, what if you want to try something different but on a much larger scale, such as a second character, for example, either a different mastery within the same class, or maybe just something totally different, and you honestly shouldn't be afraid to do so, especially because there are ways to skip the campaign relatively effectively, and all you need is, well, power, character power. As early as level 15, you reach the end of time hub to pick up your mastery, and once you are here for the first time, you actually can start doing monoliths whenever you like, if you want to, as a leveling alternative. This is made a bit weaker in 1.0 as far as the XP reward for doing so, but it's still not bad. The one thing that you really have to keep in mind though is that the first monolith area is based around level 58, so while you technically can do it at level 15, you'll probably die a fair amount, but you will still get a lot of XP when you do kill things, which makes it sort of worth it anyways, at least as an interesting alternative that will also get you some nice gear or upgrades along the way. Then once you have some levels, you can then effectively skip the campaign by using the alternate leveling paths that you can see on your map. These are a bit unclear when you first see them what they actually mean, but each of these relates to a specific dungeon or arena champion that you need keys to unlock, and if this is your second character, you'd probably have a fair few of these keys just sort of sitting around in your stash. By doing these dungeons or arenas early on, which I'd say most masteries can actually take on, the first tier ones, around level 30ish pretty consistently, and doing these will output you in the same location but in a different era, which effectively will give you waypoints in important places without having to do entire stretches of the campaign that would otherwise be required to get to these locations, even letting you get to faction unlocks without doing the whole campaign too, so it's honestly pretty effective really. On which note, our next mistake slash tip is actually factions themselves, which is don't ignore your faction. Don't get lured in by monoliths before unlocking your faction, and don't ignore the faction after you've picked it up either, because both Circle of Fortune for its prophecy rewards and the Merchant's Guild for its most accurate target farming of your life are extremely powerful in their own unique ways. Make the choice that's right for you between them, of course, but definitely don't ignore them when you could be either ranking them up and getting them to be even better for you later on. The earlier you start working on your factions, the sooner it will start to pay off for you. Then our next tip pertains to the monoliths in particular, as they are such a large portion of the endgame, especially a progression up to empowered monoliths, and this is a few split things. The first being don't overkill within echoes while heading up. You can gain bonus stability for killing enemies past the main objective, but doing so is often not worth it unless it is an echo with an abnormally high item rarity or experience multiplier. Otherwise, you generally will get far more from doing a lot of echoes faster with lower completion percentage, as the main reward comes from the completion itself. As well, don't overdo the echoes in each timeline while you are progressing for the first time. Your main goal within the monolith system to begin with should be to reach the empowered monoliths themselves as soon as you are powerful enough as a character to do so, as these are harder, yes, but they reward so much more experience and such significantly better gear that it is generally just considered not really worth your time to farm properly in the non-empowered monoliths more than you absolutely just sort of have to. And so essentially you just want to farm each timeline until you can do the quest echoes, complete them, then move on. And as we have talked about in the previous videos as well, you ideally want to just progress up the right side of the monolith path, as this requires less completions to reach empowered monoliths, while also giving you the more player power driven buffs rather than the loot based ones that you can get on the left side even later. Following that, we just have some crafting stuff to talk through here, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear about this at all. They just want to find cool loot on the floor, pick it up naturally, put it on, and then move on with their lives. But if you are not crafting in this game, you're just making a mistake. Crafting can make you notably stronger with significant speed, even as far as during the campaign, but I've heard too many stories of people saying that they refuse to even try crafting, even until right around unlocking empowered monoliths, which is quite late in the endgame cycle. And of course, it's impressive that they weren't able to get that far without it, but it also means they just had a way harder experience getting to that point than they needed to, because crafting in this game is ridiculously impactful. We have a full guide to later game crafting on this channel already if you want to check it out in its entirety, but my main tips here are, firstly, just craft in the first place. Make sure that you are actually actively crafting, knowing what type of affixes are good for you and your build, knowing what type of damage you deal and how to boost that, and put those things on your gear as early as you can. If you have glyphs of hope, always use those for crafting, as they simply let you craft more times on any given piece of equipment before you run out of forging potential, and forging potential directly translates to the ability to put more power on an individual item. So more forging potential means more power. An important thing on this note as well is just how important exalted items are later in the game. If you have an exalted item drop, always check the purple stat, and honestly you should probably save it and put it in your stash at the very least, but if you don't really know how to interpret it until later, because these exalted items are just so powerful, and if it's one that is actually important to you or one of the builds that you might use eventually, this might be worth building around entirely. And honestly, if you are part of the Merchants Guild as well, these exalted items can be quite a jackpot waiting to be found, even if it is for a class that isn't yours, which you can then spend the gold from to get your own better items for the Merchants Guild as well. So regardless, pay attention to these items, every single one of them, and honestly, don't let a single one go to waste. Always pick them up, always interact with them at the very least. They are incredibly important for the endgame, and the last thing that you want to do is find out that you lost a powerful one earlier on because you didn't realize how good it was. And then the final tip for the day really is also crafting and item based here, which is don't ignore defense or defensive stats in general. Early on, everything dies so quickly when you're killing it that it feels like getting defensive stats is sort of pointless in the game, but as you progress sooner rather than later, you'll probably realize that defense really is sort of king in Last Epoch, especially as there are no real timers in the game on any of the activities, which means that as long as you can continually survive what you are fighting and you can overpower any sort of healing that it has, then you will eventually kill it, and that will be a victory. That is how you win the activity. Obviously, the ideal balance is fast enough killing that you are just tanky enough to survive the most reasonable things, but you still kill things relatively quickly so you can farm with speed. But the point is that if you go full on into offense, like most people will do to begin with, and nothing else, you will start to die a lot. It may not happen during the campaign. It may not even happen in early monoliths, but generally before you reach empowered monoliths, you're going to want to start thinking about putting bonus health on your gear, sorting your elemental resistances out, getting some armor, and maybe even messing around with your endurance and endurance threshold, because all of these things affect how survivable you are as a character, even outside of your class's skills themselves. The main thing that I really recommend paying attention to, though, is your resistances, as it can be easy to underestimate just how big of a difference these can make when maxed out, which can be quite sizable against the matching enemy types, and it's also relatively easy to get these stats in high quantities on affixes or even from your passive skills, or skill specializations too for most masteries as well. So get some defense in your equipment in one way or another, but also get some resistances specifically in your build, as they are just a very important factor in survival in the game, especially in the later sections of the endgame that you will be coming up on. And that just about does it for today then, everyone. Just a nice hefty list of tips and tricks, mostly learned from mistakes that either I or others have made, and then adapted to and then moved on from. From fear of trying new things to a refusal to interact with crafting in the first place, there are tons of things that are easily overcome within this game, and when you do, it just makes the game even more enjoyable to play, even smoother. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and leave your own tips for newer players down in the comments below if you have them to share. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.